That's what she said. And we also give her several sentences at a time, unlike everyone else in the film, to express a point in somewhat longer form. And so, if someone wants to tell me something I misrepresented that she believes, I can't imagine what it would be. So,
no, I'm not saying that you misrepresented what she believed, but maybe like teachers union as a whole. I don't know.
Well, that she's not representative of other members of the teachers union? Well, she's the president. I mean,
yeah, I realize that.
And the fact is that many teachers would be unwilling to speak out on this subject because they get ostracized or get reprimanded, or like there's like a certain code of silence about a lot of these issues. They're not supposed to talk about it. And maybe he can speak about his own school. Maybe it's different. But there are many places. I mean, I've gotten hundreds of emails from teachers saying, "Don't use my name, but I really like your film and I agree with it. But please don't tell anybody I said this," because it's like you heard about the teacher that try to start the garden club and stay late. And I mean, so I don't know if I answered your question again.
Oh, the other point I was thinking was the merit pay. We don't have, like we have for science or for math and for language arts, we have ISTEP. And you can, but again, 50%, if we have a migrant population like at Miller Elementary School, where that teacher, that third grade teacher, whatever grade is teaching ISTEP, she gets those kids at the beginning of the year. 50% of them weren't at Miller the previous year. She only has them for, and yet those scores are going to be used to evaluate how well she teaches or he teaches, even though they've not taught that student for that long before they take the test. And we don't have those tests in social studies right now, or in dramatic arts, or in industrial tech, or in a lot of other ways.
That's true.
So where are you going to find the data to use that to be 33% of my salary if there are no standardized tests being given in every single subject that you teach in a school? I would extend, according to some of the legislation that's in the hopper now in Indiana, I could lose $8,000, $15,000, $25,000 of my salary, up to like half of my salary, based on the new formula. And they say, oh, that won't happen. It will be made up in your evaluation, in your leadership qualities, in how well you kiss my butt, maybe, I don't know. But I'm not going to make up $10,000 to $15,000 to $25,000 in salary that way. And to say, you had to get a master's degree, but now we're not going to reward you for that like we've done before, is, I think, reneging on a promise. And it does make a difference. Continuing education. These new students, I pity my son. My son teaches with me. I mean, something must have happened because he went into teaching. But he's got a whole career ahead of him. I can make it for a few more years, or 8 or 12, or however many I have to do to get. My wife says, wow, if you teach till you're 70, look what you'll make. I said, look what you'll get. I'll be dead, But I can last it. But these poor young teachers that are coming out now, my student teacher, my son, the hoops they're having to jump through, and just the perception that they're not appreciated, and that there could be, the walls caving in on their profession, is driving them. There are 49 other states. Well, I wouldn't go to New Jersey. 48 other states that they can choose to go to. If you want to talk about a brain drain, did I push somebody's buttons? You're in charge of deciding.
I'm fine with that.
The lady back there hasn't had a chance.
Okay.
Why do you think that you should have a special way of looking at teachers and not anybody that's starting out in any new job has a hard time? Our son-in-law at this time is considering going on to school. There's no guarantee that he's going to make more money when he gets out of going on for higher education than he will right now. Whereas a teacher is guaranteed. Why should teachers get all these goodies? Why should they have all these things that protect them
in
from
private
competition?
business? They have like incentives for
they have incentives, but not protection.
No, it's not protection. It's just part of the deal.
It is protection. The union protects you.
No, the school corporation's contract provides that if you get 6 hours above this degree, or you get your master's,
right.
that will be reflected in your salary.
In the private sector.
you add that the good teachers are not overpaid, but the bad teachers
yes,
are,
but
and that making no distinction is a mistake. Go ahead, sir, right there.
It seems to me you can kind of cut through most of these issues, merit pay and tenure and all these other things. To me, the core issue is the choice. I have no idea if Purdue University professors use collective bargaining and have a union, or if they're tenured or not. But I choose to go to Purdue University because it's a good school and it's run that way. And no one, I can't imagine anyone ever saying that if you live in West Lafayette, you have to go to Purdue, but if you live in Lafayette, you have to go to Ivy Tech. I mean, that would be a ridiculous
You're the first person
concept.
to ever say that. I use that example. I say, if you believe the K-12 model is smart, apply it to higher education and see what you get. Whatever state university you live closest to, by law, would be the only one you'd be allowed to go to.
Universities. It seems to me that Purdue professors have plenty of protections, and they get paid much better than public school teachers. And if you look at the per pupil cost, a lot of these public schools are paying more for their pupils than you pay going to college. I mean, why can't we? I mean, I realize you will be taking a lot of good kids out of bad schools, and that will screw the school over. But that's what should happen.
If I can explain that, because this is the thing happens a lot, and this is the result often of charter school caps, where they only allow a few to open. A lot of states have. North Carolina still has it. They have 100 counties in North Carolina, and by the state charter law, there's only 100 charter schools are allowed to open. And once 100, the idea was being roughly one per county. That was their thinking. So once 100 opened, of course, some counties got a whole bunch really quick, and then other counties now are not allowed to have any because the state cap is met, right? But there's this idea that there's just a few of them because they're artificially suppressed in growth. And so then you have these lotteries, you have a mismatch of supply-demand because the growth is suppressed. And then people say, well, this is terrible, that all the good kids are going to go to this one school and we'll be left with no good kids. And the model I envision is not this kind of artificial suppression of growth. The model I see is lots and lots of schools where every single kid has several choices of schools. It happens in universities. Why not have that in K-12? Why not have let enough open that every kid has a choice between several schools?
And even if you look at, I think that the reputation of even our worst public universities, I mean, nobody really thinks of Ivy Tech as this great place everybody wants to go, but it still has a better reputation than public schools in general have. The worst universities seem to have a better reputation, better outcomes than, at least on average, some of the public.
This perception that by having more competition with these charter schools, the teachers get screwed. But I feel like that's a big misconception, because if you have all these extra schools, you're going to have essentially, and I believe that all teachers really are there to help kids. If you ask any teacher, I believe that they're there to make a benefit on, a good impact on these kids' lives. So if you have more schools, think about the opportunity of having fewer kids in the classroom, because you're going to have more people going into the teaching profession. It's going to become more competitive, therefore more lucrative. You're going to have people who want to go there and actually do a good job. You're going to have obviously, you're going to have a lot more schools, and you could argue that these kids are going to have a better learning experience because they're going to have more personal connection with more teachers and more schools available.
The charter school lottery, the job fair we went to was packed with people. They all wanted jobs.
There's obviously a huge market.
And they get less pay. They get less pay there, but they wanted to do it. Okay,
You
go
may
ahead.
all be interested to know that we have public school choice in Indiana already. A child can go to any public school he wants to go to in Indiana if take it, if there's room. The West Lafayette School Corporation, for example, is not accepting any more transfer students right now because every single building is full. In fact, they're full to overfull. West Lafayette closed a school a couple of years ago, tore it down. And the high school, the Happy Hollow School, and the Cumberland School are absolutely full. There's no more room for any more kids. Rocky tells me he gets 5 or 6. That's the superintendent. Tells me he gets 5 or 6 calls a day. People are interested in the school system. He can't take it. But other places in Indiana, students are going from school district to school district. Students are going from school to school within school district. We do not actually have the geographical straitjacket that you think we do.
I didn't say anything but a geographical straitjacket.
Yes, you did. You talked about the separate schools.
Well, I was talking about, it's true, first of all, I support public school choice. But let's be clear, what you're talking about is a choice between unionized schools, where they have many of these rules like tenure and these areas where administration spending is whatever it wants to be, with superintendent salaries that are excessive in at least many cases, some of which are in this state.
How would you review a non-excessive superintendent salary?
I think that's a subjective measure we can all decide on our own. I think $1
What
million.
a teacher makes, 2.5 times what a teacher. Do you have a rule of thumb or what an excessive salary is?
Yes. The cost of living vary between different states, and they vary within states between different towns. In some states, they have issued, they passed a law in New Jersey that you can't make more than a governor. They figured the governor's salary, and I think it's like $185 or something. That may be exactly the number. And he said, I think this is enough for public school superintendents. So if you're going to make more than this, maybe it requires a special referendum. Actually, I correct myself. I think actually you're not allowed to make more than the governor, according to this new rule. That would have, I mean, in the state in Indianapolis, you had $1 million severance paid. It was announced in January. I mean, so it's a subjective assessment. We can all make it probably, we'd all come up with a different number if we all wrote down a number on a piece of paper. But I think anyone would agree some of these numbers are absolutely absurd. Probably even you.
Are there superintendents who are paid at a certain level?
I haven't heard examples of that. Maybe there are. I don't know all the. I don't have all their salaries in my pocket. Go ahead.
One other point in addition to pure salary would be the total benefits compared to the private sector. You want to not only have the
indeed benefits are absolutely right. Overall compensation should be used absolutely rather than just simply because as we know the benefits for many public employees are far above the average of the taxpayers who are paying money to support the people. With they themselves have much less benefits and much lower salaries than the average workers that they're hiring through their taxes. Go ahead.
I have a statement with a question. The statement is, and I make this because I think this cuts through a lot of the minutia and kind of what I see as red herrings to the real problem. Things like, focusing on what a word means or whatever. Utah passed the very first statewide voucher program, and I worked on that legislation. And every single bit of legislation we proposed took a huge chunk of the money and left it at the public school.
Yes.
Which addresses the primary objection that you bring to light in your film. So for every child we took out, we dramatically increased the amount of money they had per pupil in the public school. It went way up, way up. We're talking about a voucher program that on average would have taken about $2,200 out for the voucher and left over $5,000 for a child who no longer went to that school, that school.
Indeed.
And the UBA and the NEA were, I don't have to say they were opposed.
Indeed.
That tells me that that is a very good place to focus efforts. And my question for you is, do you see the voucher program, as I do, as somewhat of a silver bullet to cut through all this garbage that there's good points made on both sides. I would just as strongly disagree with some statements that are made by supporters on the rights, on the which side I want to call it, the side that you're basically presenting with your film. But I think that we get lost. We can't see the forest for the trees because there's all these numbers we're throwing around and everything else. But if the real objection is you're taking away from public schools, then don't take away from public schools. But we have to have something implemented that allows us to see through all the smoke screens.
Right.
But do you see it as a silver bullet like I do, or do you think that it's got some weaknesses?
No, I do. First